I was thinking earlier the fact that I dreamed about my friend Patricia last night.
Right.
Like she was looking for me in the dream. It makes me wonder. I was thinking. I even thought it was funny in my mind that the way I was thinking about it, that okay, you die and then you wanna tell your family or your friends, your loved ones, whomever, that you're okay. You died, but you didn't completely die. You survived the death, something like that. And then, how to go about to do that? How do I do that? How do I communicate? And then someone must tell you, you gotta find a medium on the other side. You have to find someone that can pull that one off.
Right.
And then they're like, well, who do I know? Do I know anyone? Because I'd have to know someone. It would be easier if someone knows me for me to come in. And then my mind was, and then I was thinking of, if someone is telling the person and is telling and saying, well, there are many people, they're the tarot readers, but, they'll interpret. They'll interpret. God, I can't say the word.
Interpretations?
Yeah, they will interpretate. No, interpret.
Interpret?
They will interpret. God, I can't say that. They will interpret the cards the way they are. Like they will tell you what each card means. So you're going to have to really work hard on getting the right cards out. Otherwise you can't get your message through or something like that. Or, that's not really easy way for you to communicate with the living. You have to find someone that does. It was just something that dawned on me.
Sure.
That I was just thinking. Well, it is as if you were in, as if, for instance, telephones were not that available, or maybe they are. You're in another town, you lost your phone, and the only way to get a phone, to make a phone call, is to borrow from someone. And if you're gonna think, well, do I know anybody that lives in this town that I can ask to borrow the phone? That'll be easier. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Sure.
It just made me think how interesting it would be to try to figure out how does it occur on the other side, because all this time I think about how to do it from over here, to talk to the dead from here.
Mm-hmm.
But how does it work from their side to talk to the living? In Spiritism, they say that there is someone there that will help you learn how to do that communication. Mm. And then there are others that say that in order to communicate, you don't need only a medium on the other side, but who is communicating with that medium has to be a medium as well. Mm. That's why it's so rare. Some people say, but who knows? I just found it very interesting that my friend was looking for me in my dream. I didn't find her, I didn't see her, I didn't talk to her, but someone else came to me and said, so-and-so came looking for you. Hmm. How is it that they find you? Because you could think that it's, well, basically it is another dimension if you think about it.
Sure. Has to be.
It has to be another dimension. And some say they live, the spiritual world is just a little bit above ours, like 2 or 3 feet above ours. It's right here, but it's another dimension. It is quite interesting because that would make sense in how difficult it is, spiritual communication. It's not as easy as people think it is. I just thought it was exciting that she's trying to reach me. Maybe.
Opens up a lot of possibilities.
Call me crazy, but I'm excited that a dead friend is trying to come true. It is, but it's not. It's not as easy, as simple as they show on TV. It's not like that. It's never like that.
Almost all stuff like that, TV is oversimplified for the masses. You know that.
What do you mean? What simplified?
Things that we see in TV and movies. If it was that simple.
Everybody was talking. Everybody be talking. Everybody. The fact, one of the main facts that made me believe that was extremely difficult was when my father died, and I was away for 8 months, and the Rotary Exchange student. Then I came back for his funeral, and then he hugged me that night. I felt the energetic hug from him, and I could smell him. It was his smell. It was him, and then he showed up in dreams after that for a few months. And then he said goodbye in one of the dreams. Now imagine if the best he could do after 8 months without seeing me, and I was his favorite. I was with him all the time. The best he could do as a spirit was to, hug me that night, because I came home. And then never showed up. I never saw him. And I imagine he probably would have some psychic abilities as well, because his family is full of that. So that made me think that it has to be extremely difficult to communicate, because he didn't. Otherwise he would have. I mean, physically or spiritually, but in the physical world. If it was easy for him to come up here, to show up himself here and communicate, he would have done it, because he sent messages to dreams.
That may be a more viable channel for them on that level.
Which makes sense, because if it is true that when we dream, the spirit gets out of the body, where it's an astral travel thing that happens, where they say we get sustained energetically. We need that. That's why we get out, whatever. If that's what happens, then the dream is a spiritual world dream. The dream has to do with the spirit. So, someone died, they don't have a body anymore. They're just spirit, and then that's where they meet with you, because you're a spirit. In your dream, it's the spirit is acting about, without the body, and that's easier for them because they don't have a body. Does it make sense? Maybe that is the way why it's easier to have this communication in dreams instead of in the waking hours.
Mm-hmm.
Where we are too. We have a spirit and you also have a body. it has to be immensely difficult for them or on the other side, as well as it is for us here on the side to communicate with them. Because it's like you said, and if you think about it, it's another dimension. How can you communicate with another dimension? It is a paranormal phenomena. It's not normal, paranormal, beyond normal. It's not normal to communicate there because it's something else. It's not, the dead don't belong here.
Right.
This is the world living.
Right. And they're on their way.
What do you mean? Oh, out of the world of the living. Is that what you see? They're on the way coming back to be living again? Is that what are you saying?
Well, yeah, in part. This is my understanding. You don't always agree with this, and it's fine. You don't need to. When we go, we are on our way someplace else. Some would say an aspect of heaven. Some would say something else. But the concept of all the dead are just basically hanging out in some kind of limbo around us, I don't think is accurate. I think that those that continue over time, whatever period of time, it's not that important, but to either communicate or attempt to communicate with the living, it's because of very, very strong impressions of attachment and desire, and that eventually, either through their own growth or through help from others, they figure out how to let go and go to the next step. And there's all sorts of discussion we could have about what that next step is, but I don't believe that all the dead are basically just hanging out on some level. They're in a period of transition from going from A to B. Not A prime, not a variation of A, but from A to B.
There could be a space of time that they can still communicate.
Yeah, I think there is, and I think it's soon after they go. And the way I look at it, and this is all analogous in terms of analogy, in terms of what you were saying, and in sleep and dreams and all that. So the analogy that I like to think about in this case, when I remember it, is that during waking times, we are able to tune into AM radio really easily, and then maybe we discover some FM. We find a radio that has FM on it, and this is all analogy, whatever. But during sleep and dreams, where it's another frequency entirely. It's another, what do you want to call it, shortwave or something else, or maybe it's something that's further up the spectrum or another place in the spectrum on the AM or FM dial that we can't easily access during waking times. There, the spirits are limited to that certain band of communication channels, frequencies, whatever you want to call it. And their access to those are also limited by the time, limited by how long, the longer time goes by, more time goes by, the less access they have to that frequency, because they're on their way to another level. And so what you do, I think, is constantly fine-tuning, what's the number on the dial that is able to get to them, and is it just one number? Because the theory would be, if you could access that, if anybody could access that, that frequency, then you'd be able to access all of these spirits that are in transition. Or that are hanging out. So maybe they have a few frequencies based on their.
It's interesting that you talk about the frequency, like a radio frequency. When I was a teenager, this happened quite often. Young teenager, when I was going to sleep and everything turned quiet. Everybody fell asleep. It was quiet, and I was still awake. All this insomnia me. So, and I would. In that quietness, I would just hear a radio station, and it was out of sync.
Yeah.
So it was just
not tuned in.
Not tuned in, and then suddenly I would hear some words. There were people talking.
Yeah.
There were people talking. That's, and then many times that was how he would start, and then I would hear some words or hit something. And it made me think, am I hearing spirits? Am I hearing people's thoughts? Because I had, through my life, many times, said things that someone must have just thought of. And I thought I heard them say it. I heard it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say it, I thought it. So there sometimes there's that capability as well. And there was that time before I went for that surgery, that mass that removed, that I was in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And before we left for the hospital, and I heard that word, remember saying, relax.
Mm-hmm.
And it was with Nene, was with me in the bedroom, and then he also looked at the radio. And I looked at the radio, because the sound came from the radio. It was a message, it was a spiritual message. The radio was off. But it used the frequencies of the radio to tell me, relax. It's weird. But we know they can use those frequencies. We know they can use telephone. Like my grandmother left a crying message for my brother on his answering machine when he got married.
Mm-hmm. I remember you
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. And that's why I'm fascinated by that concept. There's someone in Japan that has used a phone booth that doesn't work anymore. It's disconnected. All the wires are disconnected to talk to the dead. And people travel to this area in Japan and just to go pick up the phone. They somehow have a connection there. And I thought, there's a next project. Get an old phone. It has to be the dialing phone. How do you call it? Dialing? Dial? Rotary. To do that. And I thought that would be interesting. But what we were saying earlier about this time period when you just die, as I've said this before, there's that school of thought that you have a period of time after you die, that you are, the moment you die, right after you die, you are in a place where there's no past, present, or future. Everything's happening at once. And you can see, if you want to, the future of your family, if you're interested. And if you can see parts of their lives that if they need you to go help do something or deliver a message, and then you can do at that time, which you'll be seeing in the future of your family's lives, and then they'll think you're there, but you're not really there. That was when you died.
Right.
So there's that crazy
paradox
thing.
Yep.
And there is also that part of the spirit that comes out, the perispirit that is destroyed, that disintegrates after you die, because there's supposedly the 3 parts, and 1 part stays behind to just dissipate, and that could be what people see instead of the real person that died, that went somewhere else.
Could be.
Yeah, but you see, it's all could. We don't have real information. And maybe that's why, who people are contacting are this part of the spirit that just stays behind to disintegrate. It doesn't know anything about the future because it didn't go to the future. It just stayed behind. So we don't have any information what's there about.
Right. And I think that's all according to plan. I do think it's possible that that when that spirit is in that short period where it's basically not bound to time, where past, present, and future are all coexisting, that they can look and see and take care and sometimes guide or give a message or whatever that we then experience in what we perceive to be our future. But I also think that there is a simultaneous understanding of karma is unfolding the way it unfolds, and there can be an influence by the caring spirit, but it's still up to us to make our choices and all that. To oversimplify it, in the future there may be a choice that people will need to make between going down that road or that road. And we may receive some guidance, whether it's from that family spirit or from someone else or guardian angel or whatever. Don't go that way, go that way. And we may still choose to go that way. For whatever reasons, we may not get the message the way it was intended. We may not be awake enough, or we may be too bound to, well, it's nicer that way. Or for whatever reason, we can justify and rationalize that choice. So I think that it's all part of the plan. That the spiritual guidance that's given can be given. There's a sort of an understanding simultaneously that good, the message has been given. It's up to them now. So it's not like that spirit can feel ultimately responsible for the behavior of whoever they're trying to help.
No, I never said they did.
No, I wasn't saying you did. I think it becomes eminently clear to us when we transition that now our ultimate responsibility is to keep going. And when we have the very strong pull to not keep going, we are very much still encouraged to keep going. But they tend to try to reach out and connect and help sometimes, or just stick around. Anything that they can do to stick around because they feel a strong need to do that. But all of the flow of nature and whoever guides us is guiding us to keep going, onward and upward.
Yeah, but not really that upward, because if we're going to reincarnate again, we're way back here again.
As a rule, not cast in stone, it's part of the evolutionary process that we spiral up. We grow. And regardless, we're part of the process. The process is important. So we're not stuck on a treadmill. It does lead somewhere.
Only if you meditate.
No, but especially.
Well, if you get enlightened, then you leave here.
Well, then you're off the treadmill. Period.
Yeah.
Then you're off the path, basically. That's one of the greatest fascinations to me. Is there's so much emphasis in almost every spiritual tradition, whether it's religion or whether it's TM or whether it's anything else, about the path, the path, the path, the path, the path. And one of the most fascinating talks I heard, and I wasn't even I was paying attention, but there was an enormous amount of distraction because it was in India. It was Maharishi talking about the dynamics of the relationship between the path and the goal. You know, there's that the path becomes enormously important when the goal is not so reachable. And when the goal becomes more attainable, then the path becomes less important. And it unfolds that way. And and it made me really reflect on, and this is one of my pet peeves in a way. When I was in community college, I think I told you this before, it was in the Berkshires, and the slogan of the college, which was up in huge metal letters in the courtyard, was a quote from Robert Louis Stevenson that said, "To travel hopefully is a better thing than to arrive." And at first I just started feeling I'm not real comfortable with that idea. It's really important to travel hopefully, but it can't be more important than the goal. Or else, if it is, then you got to find a new goal. A different, you're either saying the goal is unattainable,
Yeah.
or you're saying the goal is not as important as the journey.
Yeah.
So why have a goal? So, and it made complete sense that community college is, to basically bridge your educational experience from high school to university and all that. So yeah, it made sense in that context.
Yeah.
Great, And I'm sure it was inspiring to many, but it hit me the wrong way. And I thought about it for years and decades and all that. And then when Maharishi started, not just Maharishi, but when I started reading about and learning more about the whole metaphysical understanding and relationship between path and goal, the only effective path is one that transcends the path, gets you beyond the path. And by those terminology, it means getting to the goal.
To the higher goal.
Yeah, the ultimate goal. Yeah. So I've always just found it very, very fascinating. And it's not just through meditation that we get off the path and we get off the cycle of samsara, of birth and rebirth and all that. But it's... This is the other thing that I find interesting, but sometimes can be confusing in discussions, is that I don't consider TM to be, or any spiritual pursuit, to be a potential path. I consider it to be a vehicle on the path, So how good is the vehicle? Is it getting you down the path, and how good are the shocks, and how good are the brakes, and how good is the, all aspects of it. Is it potentially a flying car? Can it lift off eventually? All these things. And I'm sure that in my history with TM, I considered it at times more of a path. And I think some people even confuse it as being the goal itself. But I see this in not just TM, but almost any spiritual, philosophical, or religious pursuit. People are, and again, it could be largely semantics, but people easily confuse path, goal, and vehicle.
The goal would be to get out of this cycle.
Yeah, get off the path.
Yeah, get off the path.
Yeah. Get off the path, get off the vehicle, get out of the vehicle,
Get out of here.
Yeah.
So with that said, are we stuck then?
No, but it's a bumpy road, and oftentimes there are landslides on the road that prevent our...
It makes me feel a bit like we were stuck because Maharishi had to come to the Western world to bring TM.
That's the nature of... I'm not saying...
To help us get out of this.
I wouldn't put him in the category of avatar. I don't think he ever considered himself or labeled himself that way. But in the metaphysical understandings of things, that when on Earth there are a lot of people stuck, or just the laws of nature are so the harmony of the laws of nature is just so low that
Which
it's
you are right now.
yeah, then it makes it extremely difficult to progress. Not impossible, and not the point about difficult to progress doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It just means it happens slower than we really need
Yeah.
it to be.
Yeah.
It's still happening. Then teachers show up, saints show up, avatars show up. My understanding is that Christ was one of those. And although what he said, or what Jesus said, and all that, or whatever has been interpreted, even whether he existed is not so relevant in this case, but what the teaching was, what the energy and influence was deeper than what we read about. It had a metaphysical level. It set some things back in order that were out of order, that allowed for more progress, evolution. And Krishna was one of those, and the whole story in the Gita is about that, really. I mean, Arjuna was representative of humankind, not just his dilemma. That, when there was that much disharmony with the laws of nature, then however you want to call it, depending on your perspective, is it divine grace? Is it just the metaphysical cycles that occur? Whatever you want to label it as, then it cycles around and another level of possibilities become manifest that allow us to find the path, or be better on the path, or be in a better vehicle, or whatever you want to say. It depends on how terminology you want to use. And the interesting thing is, which I had never heard prior to Maharishi talking about it, was that, and I've mentioned this before, is that when life in accordance with the laws of nature gets to almost 0% of harmony with laws in accordance with the laws of nature, it can't get to 0, because 0 means non-existence, not just of the earth, but period. But when it gets really, really, really low, like 1% or lower, whatever, then it's what is referred to as, and I don't know where this came from. I don't know if it's a combination of Vedic terms transliterated into English, and then or some physics terms. But then a great leap occurs, and it goes from almost 0% natural law to 100%. Then you have things like the time of Ram Raj, and this Sat Yuga, basically. It's just full accordance with the laws of nature. And then evolution is maximum. He also talks about, even though it's extremely relative, and we don't perceive it this way. When I say he talks about it, was in the Gita, so he was making commentary on what was there. Is that not just in the Gita, but again, whether you want to call it divine grace or some other phenomena, but interestingly, when we are in Kali Yuga, it is, again, it's all relative here, but when we're in Kali Yuga, it is the time that is easiest to find ways to evolve. When we're in Sat Yuga, it's more challenging to find ways to grow, because you're kind of there.
So if you're already there, you don't need to find anything. You're already there then.
In Sat Yuga.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a whole, that isn't just enlightenment. It's basically the universal positivity that permeates everything at that time. But even though it seems really difficult and turbulent in this age to grow, uh, this is one of the easier times to grow, to find opportunities to grow spiritually. We still have our egos, and we have our challenges, and we need to be more self-disciplined and do this and do that and all that. But in terms of opportunities to connect with the higher stuff, it's easier now because the powers that be had some sense of, he would say, or others would say, mercy to basically help us get out of this. Kali Yuga is also considered probably to be the shortest yuga.
Oh, it's been going on forever.
Oh, it goes on for hundreds of thousands of years, I think, or tens of thousands.
We want to get out of it.
And we're early in it.
I thought we were getting out of it. Really?
The way I...
What about the no age?
Yeah, so Maharishi was asked very specifically about this. And most of what I heard in response to this was that there were two things. One was that it's possible to create a reprieve, basically a mini Sat Yuga within Kali Yuga. And I don't know if he drew this diagram or if the teacher in my teacher training course was drawing it, but he was basically saying there's cycles, obviously the cycles of the yugas. And Kali Yuga is down here, and then and then through spiritual practices, collective meditation, all these different things, we start to move on up a little bit on the wave. So, and what Maharishi seemed to indicate is that it doesn't necessarily have to keep going down after it moves up. It's not always just a curve. It could potentially keep going up, more in the direction of Sat Yuga, and break through the cycles. And then
the cycles can be breakthrough.
Well, that's the next point, is that while there will be some Vedic and Hindu fundamentalist type thinking that says, no, it's the cycles of nature. But he was saying that he was putting a lot of emphasis on this as well. You said meditators, but then later on he said, and especially with siddhas and governors, he loved to use the expression. He would do this. He would say, "And time is in our hands." And at one point, I remember very vaguely, but I remember when he said that. He said, "I am speaking literally here. We can change the trends of time." He said that is the power that grows in us through our practices, changing the trends of time. He loved using these expressions, especially when he announced the dawn of the age of enlightenment, that we're changing the trends of time. And at one point he was like, I remember him like pounding it with his finger in his palm, saying, literally, not just figuratively, things will get better, but it was like he was seeing the mechanics of how time unfolds. It was like, we can change the trends, And the storylines, we've talked about this, I've read you this before somewhere, I have it somewhere on my phone. There was a story about how he met with Mother Divine, not the group, but Mother Divine, and I'm oversimplifying this, but the way I remember it is that she said to him, "You've done good work, but it's done, it didn't really work, enough." And she was basically saying to him, "You fulfilled your responsibility. You can let go now." And he basically said, "No, I have more to do, and I have more to bring out." And it had, especially, I didn't get the impression it was only this, but it was especially regarding the cities. And and she basically extended his contract. You know, it's kind of fascinating to me, to whatever extent that's true, but you know, and to whatever extent we can understand what all that means and how it was interpreted, who knows. It's an interesting story, and it's sort of, and it is certainly self-validating and all that, you know, like, okay, we're doing this stuff, we're here, we're hopeful, we stay positive, all that kind of thing. But this was not a story that was like released in a big way in the movement. It's like it snuck its way out among the more kind of Charlie Lutz type people.